You are already further into this than you think you are. The isolation didn't start last month. It didn't start last year. It started the moment you stopped noticing how long it had been since someone touched you with intention. Since someone looked at you like your presence changed something for them. Since someone prioritized being near you. You've been alone for years. You just didn't call it that. And the reason you didn't call it that is because you've been busy. You've been working. You've been handling things. You've been moving through your days with enough structure that the absence of intimacy didn't register as a problem. It registered as peace. It registered as focus. It registered as finally having your life under control. And that feeling, that sense of control, is what made the isolation invisible. Because isolation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as a crisis. It arrives as relief. Relief from the chaos of dealing with someone else's expectations. Relief from the performance of dating. Relief from the disappointment of trying and getting nothing back. And when that relief first shows up, it feels earned. It feels like you finally figured something out. Like you finally stopped chasing what wasn't working. Like you finally chose yourself. But choosing yourself was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be a reset, a break, a period of rebuilding so you could come back stronger. That's what you told yourself. That's what made it feel reasonable. You weren't giving up. You were regrouping. You were getting your foundation right. You were becoming the kind of man who didn't need validation from anyone. And once you got there, once you built yourself into someone solid, then you'd be ready. Then you'd re-enter. Then it would be different. But you never re-entered, because the conditions you were waiting for never came. You were waiting to feel confident enough. But confidence doesn't grow in isolation. You were waiting to be successful enough. But success didn't make you feel more open. It made you feel more protective. You were waiting to be ready. But readiness isn't something that arrives. It's something you build through the very action you've been avoiding. And while you were waiting, the months turned into years. And the years turned into a life structure that doesn't include anyone. And now your life is organized around your absence from the relational world. Your routines, your space, your schedule, your habits. Everything is calibrated to a life that doesn't require coordination with another person. You wake up when you want. You eat what you want. You go where you want. You spend your time however you decide. And none of that feels like a problem. It feels like freedom. It feels like the reward for all the years you spent trying to make things work with people who didn't appreciate you. But it's not freedom. It's accommodation. Your nervous system has accommodated to aloneness. It has stopped expecting connection. It has stopped preparing for it. It has stopped recognizing opportunities for it. And when opportunities do show up, when someone expresses interest, when someone makes an effort, your system doesn't register it as something to move toward. It registers it as something to assess, something to be cautious about, something that might disrupt what you've built. And that's the part you don't say out loud. That's the part you don't admit even to yourself. That the idea of someone entering your life doesn't feel like an upgrade anymore. It feels like a complication. You imagine what it would require. The negotiations, the compromises, the adjustments to your routine, the need to explain yourself, the need to consider someone else's feelings, the need to show up even when you don't feel like it. And all of that feels heavy. Not exciting. Heavy. So when the opportunity is there, you hesitate. You wait to see if she'll pursue harder. You wait to see if it will become obvious without you having to risk anything. You tell yourself you're being careful. You tell yourself you're being selective. You tell yourself you don't want to force something that isn't natural. And while you're telling yourself that, she moves on, and you feel something. But it's not disappointment. It's relief. And that relief should terrify you. But it doesn't. It feels like confirmation that you made the right choice. This is the point where the pattern locks in. The point where avoidance starts to feel like discernment. where withdrawal starts to feel like standards, where isolation starts to feel like independence. And once that shift happens, once you start interpreting your resistance to connection as a sign of strength, the cycle becomes self-reinforcing, because now you're not just alone. You're alone and convinced that being alone is a superior position, and you have evidence for it. You look at the men around you who are in relationships, and you see the compromises they make. You see the arguments they avoid. You see the things they can't do because their partner wouldn't understand. You see the ways they've shrunk themselves to fit into someone else's expectations. And you tell yourself you're not willing to do that. You tell yourself you've evolved past that. You tell yourself you'd rather be alone than settle. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that you've redefined settling. Settling used to mean being with someone who didn't meet your standards. Now settling means being with anyone at all. Because anyone at all would require you to change. Anyone at all would require you to be uncomfortable. Anyone at all would require you to let go of the control you've spent years building. And you're not willing to do that. Not because the women aren't good enough, but because the cost of entry feels too high. And the cost keeps increasing. Because the longer you stay in this pattern, the more rigid you become. The more attached you become to your routines. The more defensive you become about your space. The more skeptical you become about people's motives. The more sensitive you become to anything that feels like pressure. And all of that makes you harder to reach. Not harder to attract. Harder to reach. Because even when attraction is there, even when interest is there, you don't let it go anywhere. You keep it at a distance. You keep it theoretical. You keep it in the realm of what could happen if the conditions were perfect. And the conditions are never perfect. So nothing happens. And the years continue. And during those years, you're not sitting still. You're advancing, you're building your career, you're increasing your income, you're improving your health, you're learning new skills, you're becoming more capable, and all of that feels like progress. And it is progress, but it's progress that moves you further away from the ability to connect, because the more competent you become at managing your life alone, the less tolerance you have for the incompetence of early intimacy. And early intimacy is always incompetent. It's awkward, it's uncertain, it's clumsy. It requires saying things that might land wrong. It requires asking for things you might not get. It requires showing parts of yourself that aren't polished. It requires sitting in discomfort while you figure out if this person is worth the risk. And you've spent years eliminating that kind of discomfort from your life. You've built a world where everything is predictable, where everything is under your control, where nothing requires you to be vulnerable. And now the idea of stepping back into vulnerability doesn't feel brave. It feels stupid. So you don't do it. You wait for a situation that doesn't require vulnerability. You wait for someone who makes it easy. You wait for chemistry so obvious that you don't have to try. And while you're waiting, you're aging. Your face is aging. Your body is aging. Your references are aging. Your energy is aging. And the pool of women who are available and interested is shrinking. Not because you're becoming unattractive, but because you're becoming unavailable in a way that has nothing to do with your relationship status. You're unavailable because your life is closed. There's no room in it for spontaneity. There's no room in it for someone else's chaos. There's no room in it for the mess of building something new. You've optimized your life for efficiency, for predictability, for control. And relationships are none of those things. Relationships are inefficient. Relationships are unpredictable. Relationships require you to give up control. And you're not willing to do that anymore. You've forgotten how. And the forgetting happened gradually. You didn't wake up one day and decide you were done with intimacy. You just stopped practicing it. You stopped putting yourself in situations where it could develop. You stopped engaging with people in ways that could lead somewhere. You stopped following up. You stopped escalating. You stopped making the small moves that signal interest. And after enough time, those behaviors stopped being choices. They became defaults. And now, when you're around someone who could be something, you don't know what to do. You don't know how to move it forward. You don't know how to express interest without feeling like you're performing. So you do nothing. And nothing is what you get. And nothing has become your baseline. You've lived with nothing for so long that you've stopped feeling it as an absence. You've stopped waking up and wishing someone was there. You've stopped imagining what it would be like to have someone care whether you made it home. You've stopped expecting your phone to light up with a message from someone who's thinking about you. You've stopped wanting those things, not because you transcended the need for them, but because your brain stopped producing the chemicals that make you want them. This is what adaptation looks like. Your brain adapted to the absence of intimacy the same way it would adapt to the absence of sugar or the absence of sunlight. It stopped craving what it wasn't getting. It stopped organizing your behavior around obtaining it. It stopped making you feel bad for not having it. And now you feel fine. You feel stable. You feel like you figured out how to be happy on your own. And you have. But the happiness is the happiness of lowered expectations. It's the happiness of no longer wanting what you're not getting. And that happiness is fragile, because it's not built on fulfillment. It's built on suppression. You're not thriving, you're coping. And the coping has been so effective that you've mistaken it for strength. You've mistaken numbness for peace. You've mistaken isolation for independence. And as long as nothing disrupts that story, you're fine. But the moment something cracks it, the moment you're around someone who reminds you what it feels like to be wanted, the moment you have a conversation that goes somewhere real, you'll feel it. You'll feel the years. You'll feel the absence. You'll feel how far you've drifted. But those moments are rare now, because you've removed yourself from the environments where they could happen. You don't go places where you'd meet someone. You don't engage in activities where connection is likely. You don't put yourself in situations where someone could get close enough to see you. And when you are in those situations, you're guarded. You're polite but distant. You're friendly but unavailable. You give just enough to not seem broken, but not enough to let anyone in. And the people around you have stopped trying. Your friends have stopped asking if you're seeing anyone. Your family has stopped hinting that you should settle down. Your coworkers have stopped trying to set you up. Everyone has accepted that this is who you are now. The guy who's single. The guy who's focused on his career. The guy who's doing his own thing. And their acceptance has made it easier for you to stay where you are. Because there's no external pressure anymore. There's no one questioning whether this is healthy. There's no one suggesting that maybe you've been alone too long. And you've been alone too long. Long enough that the behaviors that got you here are no longer conscious. Long enough that you can't remember the last time you felt nervous around someone you were attracted to. Long enough that the idea of going on a date feels absurd. Long enough that you've forgotten what it feels like to have someone touch you like they mean it. Long enough that your body has stopped expecting it. Long enough that when it does happen, if it does happen, it will feel foreign. It will feel like something happening to someone else. This is where most men realize they're stuck. Not when they're suffering, but when they're fine. When they look around at their life and see that everything is in order. Everything is handled. Everything is under control. And yet something is missing. Something they can't name. Something they've trained themselves not to want. And that wanting, that absence of wanting, is the trap. Because you can't fix a problem you don't feel. And you don't feel it. You feel fine. You feel stable. You feel like you've built something solid. And you have. You've built a life that works without anyone in it. A life that doesn't require you to be vulnerable. A life that doesn't require you to negotiate. A life that doesn't require you to care about anyone's needs but your own. And that life is easier. It's simpler. It's more predictable. But it's not the life you thought you'd be living. You thought by now you'd have someone. You thought by now you'd have figured it out. You thought by now the right person would have shown up and it would have just worked. But the right person did show up multiple times. And you didn't recognize her. Or you recognized her and didn't act. Or you acted and then pulled back. Or you let it fade because it required more effort than you were willing to give. And now she's with someone else. And you're still here. Still waiting. Still telling yourself it wasn't the right time. But it's never the right time. The right time was years ago. The right time was when you still had the reflex to move towards someone, even when it felt uncomfortable. The right time was when you still believed that connection was worth the risk. The right time was before you built a life that doesn't need anyone. And that time is gone. Not because it's impossible to get back, but because getting it back would require you to dismantle everything you've built. And you're not willing to do that. You'd rather keep what you have than risk it for what you might get. And what you have is not enough. You know it's not enough. You know that on some level, you're lying to yourself. You know that the contentment you feel is not the same as fulfillment. You know that you're not supposed to go years without someone caring whether you exist. You know that something is wrong. But you also know that fixing it would require you to become someone you're not anymore. Someone who's willing to be awkward. Someone who's willing to be rejected. Someone who's willing to let someone else matter. And you're not that person anymore. You were once, but you're not now. And the distance between who you are and who you'd need to be to make this work feels insurmountable. So you stay where you are. And the isolation continues. And the years add up. And eventually, you stop thinking about it. You stop wondering what it would be like. You stop imagining a version of your life where someone is next to you. You accept that this is how it is. And acceptance feels like peace. But it's not peace. It's surrender.